Over there, replied Skarloey. Listen. The steamroller was making rude remarks about the engines. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads. And him packing. Later that morning, George was at the level crossing. Huh. You're Sir Handel, I suppose. Sir Handel was standing no nonsense. And you, I suppose, are George? Yes, I've heard of you. And I've heard of you. You swank around with your steamroller wheels, pretending you're as good as me. Actually, George chuffered on, fuming. Sir Handel tried to attract his attention. Beep, beep, beep. George took no notice. There was barely room to pass. Sir Handel was cross. Get out of my way, you great clumsy road hog. I don't move for imitation steamrollers. You don't know the road. Get out of my way. Then there was trouble. Ah! Cried Sir Handel. That was your fault. No, it wasn't. It was yours. This made everyone stop arguing. They set to work clearing up the mess instead. Next day, the workmen put up a fence between the road and the railway. Then they went away, taking George with them.
Then he heard a loud whistle. It was George the steamroller. George was cross when he saw Caroline.
Call yourself a car? You're a disgrace to the road. Find yourself a scrapyard.
George's driver was more polite.
Can I be of assistance, sir? Only if you can get me to my wife's birthday party,
sighed Sir Topham Hatt. We can take you to Thomas, replied the driver. He's just down the line.
Much obliged.
And they rumbled away.
I'll send for help,
called Sir Topham Hatt.
Stay there.
That's all I can do. George was enjoying rolling along the lane, but not Sir Topham Hatt. Oil splashed everywhere. Worse was to follow.
Help! Cried George. Something snapped.
He veered out of control, and Sir Topham Hatt landed in a muddy ditch. George the steamroller was waiting for Percy to take him to a new workplace. George was being rude to Rheneas and Skarloey.
You're just worn-out wheels on worn-out rails. I need to flatten little engines in the scrapyards, retorted George.
Then Percy arrived to take George away. He was still rebelling.
Railways are no good. Turn them into roads.
George grumbled all the way to the old branch line. He was going to turn it into a road. When they arrived, George was rude again.
Bumpy ride on rotten rails. I'm glad it's over.
So am I, said Percy.
Ha!
Huffed George. George was now enjoying himself.
Ripping up rails, he chortled. What a life! You're a useless blue puffball.
But Thomas didn't hear.
I'll show him who's boss.
At last, the workmen reached the level crossing. What shall we do here?
Tear it up, tarmac it,
said George. So they did, but not properly, and George knew it. George had been taken to some yards to work. Duck arrived with a train of empty freight cars. George was blocking his way, and a car was stuck on the main line. Let me through, demanded Duck.
You'll just have to wait,
replied George. There's no time to wait. I must clear my freight cars from the main line to let Gordon through.
Then he'll have to wait too,
said George. Look who's here, said Thomas. George had been found out by Sir Topham Hatt and punished. He looked miserable. "Now we'll get some peace at last," said Percy.
I want to get rolling again, but I've got to wait a whole week till I do.
"And then you'll be just as rude as ever. Eh, George? I hope not. Don't you?" James and Thomas were waiting at the level crossing. They were still worried about the hot air balloon. "We're out of hot air!"
The work began. Thomas raced into the yard. Percy was... Emily stopped to fill up with water on the way to the flour mill, but James was already there. George was waiting on a low loader. Thomas raced back as fast as he could. George smoothed the runway. Neville was speeding through the countryside as fast as he could. And Farmer McCall was building a shed for his cows to keep them warm.
And the biggest carnival Sodor had ever seen.
The time for gods will shine anew on Sodor Day.
I'll show him who's boss.